Hello, thanks for joining me again. Now, anyone that knows and has seen our website will know that generally we don't sell tools. It's not anything that's of particular interest to us. However, when it comes to saving a few pounds and doing a tool that we think we might be able to do that maybe you can't get on the market, you have a specific use for it, then I start to get a little bit interested. Now, before we go any further, I'm just going to have a look at a very common tool that I've got here. I'm not going to tell you what make it is because I don't think that's very fair. Nothing wrong with this tool at all. But if you can see at the end here, this is a standard shaped tool handle. And I don't know whether you can see at the end here, the wood doesn't come to the end. It's pretty poorly finished, to be honest. And I've always thought it's a bit strange that us wood turners actually buy tools with a wooden handle already on. This is the sort of thing that we make. We don't need to buy it. They normally come with, as this one has, lots and lots of scratches all over it, in a nice shiny finish. Is it nice and shiny? I don't particularly like shiny tools, but there you go. And here's another one. Again, I'm not going to tell you whose it is, but if you know your tools, it'll probably be fairly obvious whose it is. And once again, at the end there, the wood doesn't come to the end of the ferrule, and it's an okay. The tool is fine. The handle is quite nice, but is it the handle that I want? I don't know. It'd be nice to make my own, wouldn't it? Well, again, I'm going to stress there's nothing wrong with those at all. However, what we've managed to get our hands on is a small supply of this, and this is 8mm by 8mm HSS tool steel. I've tried several bits of steel. Some of them aren't very good. This is actually quite good. And yesterday, when I was practicing, I made myself this tool. I've sharpened it at the end. They do take some sharpening, and I've used one of our little locking nut sections here, so I can actually unlock that like that. I can take them out, turn it round, pop it back in, and I have got a double-ended tool. And the handle is made as I want the handle to be made. So what I'm going to do now is show you how I did this. We don't do this as a kit. At the time of doing the video, we don't do this as a kit. What we can sell you is an 8x8mm bit of tool steel. We can sell you one of these inserts. You'll see that I've got a ferrule on here. This is actually an old bit of 22mm copper pipe. Any metal tubing will do if you cut it and put it on here. It's not essential that you actually have one anyway, so we don't supply these. That'll be a case of getting your own. But I'll show you how I did this. Very satisfying. Doesn't take long. I think the first one, this one I did, took me less than an hour. A little bit of spalted beech for the handle, and the other bits that I mentioned already. So stay with me and I'll show you how to make one of these fairly simple tools. I'm not going to show you the sharpening of this because that's something that you need to do on a grinder. And you will want to do it whatever shape you require for your tool. I'm going to quickly run through most of the stuff that I will need. I'm not going to mention lathes and pencils because you obviously know that you need those. I'm starting off with my blank, and this particular one is 270mm long and just over 50mm across. You can use whatever size blank that you like. It depends how long a tool handle you want. I've got my insert screw here. I've got my tool steel here. I use an 11mm drill bit, an 8mm hex key, and the 8mm hex key is for driving in this nut here. A 4.5mm hex key because that's your adjuster for the thread inside there. An old bit of copper tubing. This is 22mm, this is optional, and that's pretty much all you need. So I'll show you how I do this. What I'm going to say to start with is that the tool steel is 200mm long. Now the way I've done mine is I have 130mm sticking out of the tool, 70mm actually embedded into the tool handle. So the first thing I'm going to do is mark the centres of this and drill down as level as I can, 70mm to accept this. So I've got my 11mm drill bit. I've got this as upright as I can to drill in the centre to make sure that when my tool steel goes in, it goes in centrally, but we will be turning this between centres. So we're now going to drill down 70mm down here to take 70mm of the tool steel. You need to leave yourself enough room to add the ferrule on if you're putting one on. Mine's going to come up to about this point here, which is about 11-12mm. I'm going to mark at 30mm here in the centre, and I'm going to use the 11mm drill bit to drill down in here, and this part is for the insert screw to go into. And there we have our two intersecting holes. The tool steel is going to go in this section, and the insert nut's going to go into this section. Now if I take my tool steel, you will see that it's a very, very tight fit to get that tool steel into that 11mm hole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in the vise, and I'm going to turn this block of wood onto this steel, because what that means is that we're going to get a really good fit with that hole onto this steel. So pop the end on there and work it down, give it a good twist. This steel is designed for cutting not only wood but other steel, so it's extremely hard and it'll have no problem whatsoever cutting the hole the exact size that it needs to be. And there you can see we've got the beginning of a tool. When we've got that down there, I'm just going to check the length there, and I've got just over 130mm showing out of the end there. So that is ideal and really quite secure in there. I can feel just a very, very slight movement, but again, don't forget we're going to lock that down with this locking nut here. So now we're going to go to the lathe and make the handle the shape we want it. I've turned my stock round. I've got a good depth on this. I'm now just going to turn this for the right size for my ferrule. I've marked on here using the ferrule where that needs to come, having made sure I've got a nice flat end on this section. I'm now just going to measure the internal diameter of the ferrule that I'm using, and that tells me about 19.5mm. Now we actually need the ferrule to be tight onto the wood, so I'm just going to increase that slightly to 20mm. And that should get us a good tight fit with the ferrule over the end. If it's not a tight fit, it's not critical. I'm probably going to glue this on anyway, but it just helps if it is quite nice and tight. I've stopped briefly just to tell you that it's quite important when you're doing this part you don't over tighten. If you're turning between these centres and using a dead centre at this end or your own chuck, that you don't over tighten it, because as this bit gets thinner it could split, and the whole idea of putting the ferrule on is so this doesn't split. So nice light pressure, enough to turn it but not a massive pressure at either end at this. So I've got this around about the right size. I've got a slight taper, so it's just slightly thicker coming up this end than it is at the very front. I'm now going to fit the ferrule on. Right, I've fitted my copper ferrule. I've glued this on there. I had a little bit of wood sticking out the end, so I've just sanded that down on the belt sander, and a little bit of sanding on the inside, because having criticised other people's tools, you feel that you really should get it right and quite nice in these, which is what this is now. And we're now going to remount this, and then we'll look at shaping the handle. Now if we look at the first tool that I made, you'll see the insert screw here is fitted up towards this end where we've drilled a hole on this part here, and this is quite critical that this part of the tool remains quite thick. One is for stability and the other is to make sure that this insert screw doesn't crack the handle, because it is a tight fit and it needs to be a tight fit. So I don't recommend you turn this any lower than approximately 40mm. This one here is actually about 38, which is okay, but I'd aim for about 40mm at this section, and then down the other part you can make it whatever shape you like. The other thing that I always do is always leave the little tool mark at the end there, so if at any point you want to put the handle back onto the lathe to make any changes, you've got your two centres there and you can do it no problem. If you take away the centre at the end, you're going to have to recenter it and return it all. And this is the part when you're shaping it that you can, of course, remove it from the lathe and see how it feels in your hand to make sure you get a comfortable and a nice shape, and know that you can easily remount it on the lathe and carry on where you left off. Now the reason I'm making a second tool, apart from the fact that it's good fun, is that I'm going to use the tool that I actually made yesterday and sharpened, and this is just sharpened on a jig that I recently made. If you follow us on Facebook, you'll have seen that and my terrible welding, but just to show you that these are actually quite good tool steels and how they cut this wood. So I've got roughly my shape on here. What I'm now going to do, and anyone that's seen my videos before will know that I'm a big fan, because partly because we sell them and partly because they're so easy. My homemade bowl sander, just to finish this off a little bit, and then we're going to put the insert screw in this section here. So I've done a little bit of finishing. It feels quite nice to hold this so far. I've got a few individual knotty bits here. I'm not really too worried. I'm not really too worried about the finish. I am just going to put some oil on here. I'm not going to finish this highly polished, because there should be plenty of oils and sweats that come out of your hand while you're holding this, that help to make the tool your own, to colour it your own way. And to make it that little bit individual. However, of course, if you want to put a high sheen polish, you obviously can do. I'm just going to put a little bit of Danish oil all the way along here. And the reason I'm doing that now is because when this part here goes in, there'll be a little bit protruding from there. And I don't really want to have that protruding while I try and oil the rest of it. I'm quite happy with that. The next bit I'm going to do is put a small countersink in this part here, ready to take the insert screw, and I'm going to do that over on the pillar drill. So I've been over to the pillar drill, I've put a little countersink in the top there, and I'm now ready to fit this wood insert screw. Now these need to be tight, but you might find an 11mm hole isn't quite big enough. It depends on the piece of wood. Every piece of wood is different. So what I can tell you is, if you see the wood begin to crack, don't keep screwing this in, because it'll just get worse. Take it out, enlarge the hole slightly, and I do that on the pillar drill, just holding it under the drill and just giving it a slight movement just to enlarge the hole, just fractionally. But we'll screw this in here, 8mm hex key to screw this in, and we'll try and get it in level as well. So they are quite tough, these, and they need to be quite tough to hold the tool steel in place. That of course won't be round on the tool handle, but that is fitted, and we can now use the locking nut to put in there, and that is our tool handle finished. All we need to do now is insert the tool. Again, here's the previous one I made, and it's unlikely you'll need to make two. One handle will obviously take all these tool steels, depending on how many you want and how many different shaped tools that you want. But I'm just going to use this 4.5mm hex key for the locking nut. That removes, and we can now insert that tool. And lock that down. That is nice and secure in there, and you have a double-ended tool and a new tool handle shaped your way. So here we have two very different tool handles, so I could easily identify which is which if I needed to. Above all, they're very satisfying to make, they're good fun to make, they're not very expensive. So I hope that's been helpful and of interest to some of you. As always, drop us an email. Please follow us on Facebook and see what we get up to on there too. Thanks very much for joining us. I hope to see you at our next video. Thanks for watching. Bye bye now.